Hello everyone, Welding Star here. In today's video, I'll take you through the process to make a bottle rocket for my AP Physics 2 class, taught none other by K-Cool Science herself. Make sure to subscribe to her channel, by the way. The link will be in the description. For this project, my group and I decided that it'd be best to 3D print the components so that the parts would be more accurate. I began by modeling the rocket using Onshape, which turned out to be the easiest part of this project. Once I was happy with how the rocket looked, I exported all the files and sent them to my 3D printer. Easy part, done. The first part of the rocket that I began to assemble was the fins. I placed a piece of tape across one side of the fin to secure it so I could weld one side together. Once I was done, I flipped the piece over, removed the tape, and welded the other side together. The next part of the assembly process was attaching my alignment straps to one side of the fins. These straps will allow me to space the fins equally when they are put on the rocket body. To ensure that these straps are lined up, I used some masking tape to secure them and then followed up by welding one side of the straps down. I then removed the tape and welded down the remaining sides. I then added some filler, PLA, to get a cleaner and stronger weld around the edges. Before being able to move onto the assembly, I had to weld together the piece that will connect the electronics housing to the main body of the rocket. This piece was by far my favorite to weld. As this was a main structural component of the rocket, I had to ensure that I pushed the soldering iron deep enough to form a strong weld. I then went over the weld and added some filler material to make it look cleaner. To make the part look cleaner, I went over it with a file, making it perhaps the cleanest welded component on this rocket. After all that welding, it was time to start assembling the main body of the rocket. Before starting to weld anything, I secured all the components with duct tape, and sure enough, they lined up. I moved on to welding the alignment straps onto the other side of each fin. I anticipated this rocket having to take quite an impact upon landing, so I didn't want to cut corners by only welding one side of the fins. To be extra safe, I also welded the top alignment strap to the part that connected the electronics housing to the 2-liter bottle. By doing this, I hope to reduce some of the stress that could potentially be put on the fins if the rocket were to land on them. At this point, I was done with the structural welding. However, the rocket was still not strong enough. The welds only connected parts of the rocket together. To make it stronger, I added hot glue to the areas that needed reinforcing, the upper part of the fins and the part where the bottle meets up with the lower part of the fins and the fin alignment straps. To make the glue bond stronger, I ran my finger over the fresh glue. This ensures that the glue is able to make full contact with the 3D printed part. If I didn't do this, the glue would still remain in small blobs, so to speak, and would not bond well with the 3D printed parts. Finally, I attached the last part of the rocket, which was the guide rail. This rail would allow the rocket to be launched vertically, which would allow us to control the rocket's trajectory when launching. The rail was also welded on instead of hot glue to reduce the risk of it breaking during the launch. The previous night, I worked on a rocket body but didn't finish it because I wanted to get some sleep. So I ended up working on it at 5 a.m. the next day. All I had left to do was add some filler material to the fin alignment straps to increase the strength of the weld, and then weld the alignment straps to the part that connected the electronics housing to the bottle. I then added some hot glue to the parts that did not require welding, again smearing the glue with my finger to get a much stronger bond. The last thing I had to do before finishing this rocket body was to attach the guide rail, which was held in place by a piece of masking tape as I tacked it in place. Once it was tacked in place, I then finished up the weld and added some filler material for a stronger weld. At 6:30 a.m., I was ready to begin working on repairing Neptune 1 due to an incident when testing it initially. Great. As this was the first rocket I assembled, I didn't think that hot glue would not be able to withstand the impact forces on the rocket. So I saved this rocket for last because I really did not feel like scraping off a ton of hot glue off 3D printed parts. I initially began to cut the hot glue off with a box cutter, but the blade was quite short, so I switched it over to my pocket knife, which seemed to do a much better job at cleaning off the glue. After that, I was ready to continue welding up the rocket. As I've gone through the welding process already, I'm not going to bore you with another explanation of the same process, so I'll just show the time lapse. Enjoy.